He once won a spelling bee in an ancient language that he did not speak. He is the only man to ever earn extra credit on an IQ exam. His academic degrees are considered legitimate spending currency in 22 nations, 2 principalities, and at Chick-fil-A restaurants in the United States and Western Canada.
I do not always talk about education, my friends, but when I do, I prefer the Dr. Duke Show. Stay educated, my friends. The FDA says that a puberty-blocking drug is linked to thousands of deaths, but don't let that fact get in the way of the BS progressive narrative that not giving children these drugs is sentencing them to death. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're talking about a mom in the UK who boasts that at age 3, her child became the youngest transgender toddler. Plus, Mattel launches the first gender-neutral doll to be more inclusive. Look, I've seen dolls with the pants off. I don't see anything down there anywhere for the last 50 years. I don't see how this is new. But we start with an alarming report from the FDA that finds a transgender puberty-blocking drug has been linked to more than 6,000 deaths. Now, this is a controversial story, Katie, because the FDA says this drug that is also used for male prostate disease has been used as a puberty blocker in children. And so the debate is, where are these deaths coming from? But the fact that people are dying from this, even adults are dying from this when they're using it as a prostate drug.
Yeah, so the FDA kind of came out with this report, and people are reporting on it. The Daily Wire actually had the story first when I saw it, and right away they were being attacked by NBC, explaining the drug in question here is called Lupron, and the drug itself is often used to treat prostate cancer in adult men. And then the FDA data, if you look at it, well, there's more than 6,000 deaths, and most likely, they did say likely in quotes here, likely these deaths are associated with these patients, the men. But the off-label brand here, this of Lupron, is being used as a puberty blocker in our children. So basically, the fact that it's being prescribed as a hormone blocker for our gender-confused children, what NBC is trying to say is, this is fake news. Well, clearly, they're trying to push it because the narrative on their end is that they want our children to be taking these puberty blockers.
So what NBC and the progressives and the LGBTQ Alliance, what they're all saying is that we're going to interrupt the natural process of a child's body that would lead to adult sexuality, that would lead to puberty and the evolution of the body into its childbearing or child-producing strain, right? That's what we're going to do. We're going to inhibit this now with an artificial drug. We're going to block a body's natural process that would give the child a more profound sense of their gender and sexuality. Why are we surprised that any drug that is halting one of the natural processes of the body would be ultimately good for the body of the children? We are treating psychological disorders now as physiological disorders. We are not treating the psychological problems, which remain. We are radically altering the body. That would be like somebody who was so obsessed about Michael Jackson, right? Who's so obsessed about his body image, about what his face looks like, about the color of his skin. Somebody so traumatized by the way he looks that we're going to do what Michael Jackson did.
Yeah, so we want to be clear, too, when we talk about these deaths, these 6,300 adults have died from reactions to this Lupron drug, but that it is being used off-label as a puberty blocker. I just want to reiterate that to everyone so they understand it. And the Food and Drug Administration, the data that they collected, this has been an extensive look back at how this drug has interacted. Between 2012 and June 30th of 2019, the FDA documented more than 40,764 adverse reactions by the people who've taken this drug, and it's leuprolide acetate, which is Lupron.
And you've seen these drug commercials anyway, right? There's this new drug for asthma, new drug for psoriasis, new drug for artery blocking, right? And yet, when you look at the fine print, this drug cannot be taken with, and if you have this, and don't take it if that, this long list of things, right? And this is for adults. And so this drug has not been seriously tested as a simple hormone blocker for children. So how do you even know this is a viable thing to do? And when the FDA tries to call attention to this, the radical progressive agenda with regards to transgenderism is all over them.
Exactly. So it's being used as a hormone blocker, and of that, more than 40,000 adverse reactions. They're saying more than 25,500 of them logged from 2014 to 2019. So 5 years were considered serious, and then that's where the 6,300 deaths come in too. So this, when you take a look at any drugs, I mean, it's America here, and we prescribe for everything. You're now looking at your own child and thinking, well, my kid's gender confused. If you're considering giving them a hormone blocker, and you're just trusting, I don't know, just hearing things.
Why are you doing this? Why, if you love your kids, why wouldn't you gently make them wait until they go through puberty and then reassess this? I mean, the rush to become a boy or a girl, if you're one or the other, it's not going to end if this is a legitimate thing. Let them go through puberty. Let them have some counseling to find out where they are. How much of their problems are simply mental as opposed to biological? Why don't you just let them become 13 and 14-year-olds before you subject their bodies to irreversible surgeries or medications? That would be responsible parenting.
Michael Laidlaw is a California-based endocrinologist, and he said back in April that doctors are giving the testosterone to gender-confused girls as young as 8 years old, and he questioned why a psychological disorder like gender dysphoria would be treated with such drugs instead of proper psychological care. He says gender dysphoria is not an endocrine condition, but it is a psychological one and should therefore be treated with proper psychological care. And he says, but it becomes an endocrine condition when you start using puberty blockers and giving cross-sex hormones to kids.
Exactly. And you go back to what he just said. It's kind of what I just said as well. Why are we're actually criminalizing, and states are actually criminalizing psychotherapists who try to deal with the psychological aspects of this in little children. This is primarily a psychological disorder. It is not a body disorder. There's nothing wrong biologically with these kids' bodies. If you're a little boy who thinks he's a girl, your body is evolving as a boy the way it should. It is perfectly and utterly natural for you to progress as a boy. For your parents to artificially halt that is dangerous. And then you top that off with the fact that in some states, you're not even allowed to talk to the kids to try to get their minds right or to figure out what's going on there. This is going to come up again later in the show, but I want to reiterate something that some of the doctors said. We are going to rue this day. This is one of the most radical ways of abusing and destroying children that we have ever conceived in the history of the world. The fact that we're closing down access to mental care and psychological care. You got the psychological organizations all behind this. And you are radically tinkering with children's bodies. This is something out of the Nazi regime. This is something out of the Doctor, Mengele, right? Where you're pumping kids full of dangerous drugs and you're just going to sit back and watch. What happens here? What mutations are there? It is really, really creepy and criminal. And as one of our later stories is going to point out, this kind of radical change without dozens of decades of study, without careful consideration, without a serious set of conferences about the moral, the ethical, the biological ramifications of this, not hearing from kids who've gone through it and regret it, finding out why these kids are killing themselves, all of that's being washed away because parents are suggesting to suggestible children that maybe you're not what you think you are. We're not going to choose your gender at 3. You tell me what you want. I mean, you would never do that for any other aspect of a kid's behavior. You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't put a little bowl of broccoli and a little bowl of donuts on the floor and say, okay, at 3, I'm going to see if you're a vegetarian or a donutarian, right? This kind of suggestibility is bizarre and crazy. And yet, we're doing it to generate a generation of kids. We're screwing with their minds, and that's one thing. But you are changing their bodies before their minds are old enough to decide for themselves.
But we have a mother who's over in the UK and is proud of how her child was, I guess, the youngest trans toddler at the time. Now, at just 3 years of age, her Luna, and we never learned what Luna's boy name was, it's just Luna now, who's now 8, became one of the youngest trans kids in all of Britain, she says. The feature is written on Janine Schofield's only child, once a boy and now a girl. And so Janine is talking throughout this entire feature piece about how Luna made the same wish every Christmas and birthday from the age of 3. I want to be a girl. And at 7, then Luna got the wish because Luna's name was officially changed. And again, I don't know what the boy name ever was, but Luna started wearing a skirt to school and got a whole new passport. So, I mean, the world of life with this Luna was horrible up until age 7. Then when she could become whoever she wanted to be.
You know, the fact that mom is proud of this, is doing TV interviews, is bragging about this now, it suggests what this is. Do you expect us to believe, Janine, do you really expect us to believe that without your coaching, without the environment you created for that child, without your nudging and suggesting and the kind of things you had the child watch, you weren't driving that student that way, that your kid that way? The idea that somehow this radically randomly happened is bizarre. In fact, the funny thing is, what we keep hearing from the progressives is that's exactly what happened with heterosexuality. Heterosexuality isn't a thing. Moms and dads just nudged their kids. Moms and dads just exposed their children to heterosexuality. That's why everyone was heterosexual. If you remove that, everyone's going to be gay and transgender. And yet, when they do it, no. This, at age 3, is finding their own way.
Well, and the thing is, when you read the whole story, Janine talks about how initially she was skeptical and how her family felt, oh, this is too young. And then this is exactly what happens because parents, and I guess in the age of social media and all the access we have to all the resources and whether or not they're legit resources, she says, the more research, the more I realized transitioning didn't mean the end. And Luna could have a happy life and find love as a girl. So the more she dug into
She's 7. What love is she finding now?
Okay, yes, but
I
Janine,
know.
And this is what our parents do now because they're not being taught and educated in school to think, so they're just supposed to, whatever information comes their way, and we're being just infiltrated with this type of stuff all the time and how you have to be woke and let your kids decide everything for themselves.
And this is the English National Health, right? National Health Care in England. The NHS, the National Health Care Society, the organization of national health services in the UK. Imagine the BBC radical progressives in lab coats. Yeah. And that's what you get with the NHS. But even NHS psychologists said.
And for the record, she's a nurse, Janine, so Janine understands this.
Right.
Yeah.
But actual NHS psychologists, right? That would be like LGBTQ psychologists warning this is dangerous. You've got the NHS psychologists who are now saying that children are allowed to live as the opposite sex too soon. They say letting kids as young as 6 socially transition could do long-term harm by forcing them to choose too early. So it's not just the drugs that are bad, but if you allow them to socially transition. So let's say you're a quasi-responsible mom. Your 3-year-old wants to wear your shoes around, and then you have a coming out party for him being a girl because he wants to clomp around in your high heels. You get all your girlfriends over, you sell some Tupperware, you talk about how wonderful progressive you are, but you're a quasi-responsible mom who allows the kid to dress and act and wear makeup like a girl, but you don't give them the medicine. That's better than nothing. But this, the NHS is telling us, is dangerous because you are suggesting the child into a worldview that it doesn't choose for itself.
And we talked about this in a previous story, but Janine, the mom, says the next change for Luna, because Luna's 8 currently, as we said, the next change won't be for a few years. So what, 2, 3 years? When Luna starts puberty and she can choose for herself if she wants hormone blockers and medication and whatever else she chooses.
Yeah, bull. It's not her. You've dressed her. You go ahead.
But the best. But it will be her decision.
Yeah.
And hers only.
Yeah, right. It never has been.
Mom!
It has never been. What kind of a parent are you that can't see this? It has never been her decision. She was and still is at age 7, utterly too young to make any of these decisions. And there are a lot of decisions that are less harmful, Janine, that you would never let a child this age make. Ones that don't have the kind of life-altering consequences. Oh, and you're telling me when she gets to be 10 or 11 and it's time to take the hormone blockers, you're going to be, now, honey, here are the consequences of hormone blockers. Here's what's going to happen with you with regards to fertility. Here's what the dangers are with certain kinds of cancers. Here is the suicide. You're going to sit them down and give her that information? No, you will not.
Well, we have an actual doctor over here in the United States who's saying This is dangerous, and you know what? Everyone is going to regret this. Johns Hopkins University psychiatrist has slammed the medical and psychiatric industries for what he says is reckless and irresponsible treatment of patients who claim to be transgender. Thank you, Paul McHugh. He's a renowned psychiatrist from Johns Hopkins, and he actually talked to the College Fix about how he believes that transgender people are being experimented on because the doctors treating transgender patients with hormones, quote, don't have the evidence that the treatment will be the right one.
And it goes back to my comment earlier about Mengele. This is, in a way, this kind of eugenical research and experimentation on live human subjects, children no less, is something that would have been quite welcome in the Nazi period. I mean, there's no doubt that if they had these kind of medicines, had this kind of ability to mess with people's gender and biology, the Nazis would, to the degree they could have, they did it. And if they had this, they'd have been all over this. And he's exactly right. You do not know how to treat each individual. Every individual is different. We have no protocol. We have no 20 years of case studies. We have no serious scientific research that will follow these kids after the joy of changing. What happens when they're 30 or 50 or 60? What happens to them in their old age? We have no evidence for any of this, and you're moving full speed ahead 65 miles an hour.
And it's like, remember we talked about, I think it was over the summer, the study about how 80% of gender minority, as they're called, gender minority college kids have mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And this study was done with more than 65,000 students. So it's not like, we talked to 200 kids and 80% of them have issues. We have more studies of what's going wrong than what's going right. And yet,
right. That's right.
This is where
that's the other thing. This is the thing, too, and the progressives set this up nicely.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime a kid kills themselves, who goes through all the transition,
yep.
Anytime a kid has been socially transitioned, anytime a kid is allowed to live the gender they think they want, and something bad happens, disease, psychological illness, suicide, that's our fault as a culture for not having given them the stuff earlier, right?
Or bullying of some sort.
This is not science, people. What you're doing to your children is a progressive utopian dream. You're dealing with your kids in a fairy tale way. This is not simply kissing a toad and becoming the opposite gender. You are ignoring, as parents, the severe consequences that we do know are going to ensue. The earlier you do this stuff, it is unbelievably unacceptable.
Yeah, and so McHugh actually comes out and he thinks eventually, and it can't come soon enough, eventually our society will look back on this craze, as he calls it, as something of a historical shame. He says, I believe it will be something like how we think of eugenics now.
That's right.
We will come to regret it when we discover how many of the young people that were injured regret it themselves.
These are children who are being used as guinea pigs in your progressive new sexual, genderless utopia.
And yet we criticize and protest when rats are given any sort of type of treatment.
Putting cosmetics on bunny rabbit eyes is
PETA is all over it.
It's the end of the world.
But our kids,
radically re-engineering our children mentally and physically and psychologically, that's progressivism.
And it's psychologically here with what Mattel's doing now. What is Mattel doing?
The child doll maker has now created a doll for everyone, unless you're a boy or girl.
Oh.
Right? A doll for everyone, unless you're an actual boy or a girl. Gender neutral dolls. let me repeat that. This is a doll for everyone, unless you're actually a girl or a boy. Then those we're going to frown on. These dolls are genderless. They're gender neutral. Right in the opening paragraph, they tell you what this is. It's not about getting 1/10 of 100% of these gender confused kids happy with toys that look like them or think like them or seem like them. No. There aren't enough boys playing with dolls. There are not enough boys, right, dragged in to play the way girls do. And so this particular toy doll, and it's rare for parents to bring boys into these research groups to play with dolls. It's rarer still for a boy to immediately attach himself to one of these dolls the way Shia did, who's the boy, transgender boy in this. And so notice from the outset of the story, it's not about helping gender-confused kids. It's about making boy kids much less boy.
And that's what this whole thing, it's all pure marketing scheme. I mean, Mattel, Barbie has been going downhill, I think, for a while since Ken had his ways. But now they're trying to okay, what can we do to try and, be woke and get the left on our side and sell more dolls? So they created the doll to be a boy, a girl, neither or both, according to them. And they're calling it the world's first gender neutral doll. Of course, if you say you're the first of this, they're going to try and jump on that marketing bandwagon. And it launched just about a week ago. And they want the traditionally deemed taboo for half of the world's kids to just, be done. And so they took the dolls and they did all this marketing on it. I think they had, something like 250 families involved with across 7 states, and they had 15 children who identify as trans, or at least their parents say they're trans, gender non-binary or gender fluid. And they got them all together and tested out this new doll that just looks like all the boys of today.
Yeah, and listen to this.
Let me say.
Carefully manicured features betray no obvious gender. So if you are obviously one gender, you're out of luck.
Yep.
The lips are not too full. The eyelashes are not too long and fluttery. The jaw not too wide. There are no Barbie-like breasts or broad Ken-like shoulders. So in other words, everything that distinguishes male from female in science, in biology, in the natural world, everything that denotes masculinity, not because it's some conspiracy, but because that's what masculinity is. As the hormones make a boy a man, shoulders broaden, hips narrow, right? Facial hair grows. All that now is what we're at war with. We are at war with actual reality. And we're going to force real boys and real girls to pay a price for it.
And the thing for me, and it's always been a thing for me, that all these dolls or any time in school, we're pushing the kids, well, I need a role model. I need someone to be just like me, so I have someone to look exactly like. Mm-hmm. But you can't do that with any doll, no matter how specific or unspecific, I guess you make it. Because still, I want a doll that's very short. I want a doll that's left-handed. I want a doll that had glasses. I want a doll. You're not going to find that, but you're trying to push these kids to think that
it's pretend.
If they don't look exactly like you in the mirror, then you can't look up to them.
What they're also doing is they're giving you these dolls and calling them the complete transgender doll when it's up to the kid's imagination.
Exactly.
Right? Look at this. This Mattel's first promotional advertising spot for the $29.99 product. And if you really cared about transgender, you really cared about kids, why not give them away, Mattel? You're doing something revolutionary. What about poor transgender kids? Why don't you, if you so believe in the sociology of this is such a social justice thing for you, why don't you give the dolls away? Why not take a hit yourself in your pocketbook and give these out to families? Tell me, if you were giving these dolls away free and charging $29.99 for the repulsive male and female dolls that are no longer recognized, give them away. Do it, Mattel. Stop playing the corporate game. Stop shilling for political correctness and making a lot of money and having a little commitment here, right? So Mattel's first promotional spot for the $29.99 product features a series of kids who go by various pronouns. How do you project that on a doll, as Katie said, right? You don't need a doll of any gender. You could just have a block of wood, and that might even be better.
Yes.
How about just a big block of wood, an uncarved, carved, polished block of wood, right? With no arms, no legs, no genitals, no hair at all. And let the kid use his imagination to project those things on the doll, because that's what you're doing here. You're trying to create a doll that is not male and not female. It is nothing. And then still you have the problem. The doll has long legs and lustrous hair, right? And how do you address a doll by a pronoun? Just give them a block of wood that they can write on. Let the kids write on whatever they want in the block and sell it for $29.99, Mattel.
And that brings this week to a close, just as September is gone and here's October. Now, while consuming that pumpkin spice everything, make sure to share this episode and subscribe to the free audio podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, and everywhere else. Just visit drdukeshow.com and click on any of the platforms on the top to subscribe.
And that'll do, Pig. If you like the show, please consider supporting it by signing up for our Patriot Club. Just $25 a month keeps the lights on and Katie's masseuse fully employed. Visit drdukeshow.com to get started, and we'll be back again on Monday with plenty more to talk about. I think we're going to market this. Let's do the first genuinely transgender, transhuman, right, doll. I'm going to bring in a block of wood. Put it right there. And we'll see how many people want to buy that. Maybe that could be one of our Patriot Club giveaways, right? The first ever genuinely transgender, transhuman doll, right? No arms, no legs, just a block of wood. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. And until next time, stay educated, my friends.